Welcome back to the Wizard Tower project. This is our 13th tower, the Tavern, Part 1. As always, we start by prepping our cardboard tube, cutting it in half, adding magnets, and a hinge. For this tower, I'm going to cut out a significant portion of the tube on both sides. I roughly measured out an inch on all 4 of the sides. The idea is that the tavern is in the middle of a forest, so it is covered in trees. So I'm cutting out a big part of the tube so that I can construct the trees in the gap. Now our tube is all ready to go, and I've definitely learned my lesson. I am basing this whole thing in Mod Podge before I play around with clay and water and warp this tube yet again. So before I add the clay, I am roughly constructing these tree-like shapes all around the tower. This will just help to save us a lot of clay, and the clay is really heavy, so we want to use the least amount of clay as possible. I have a lot of different kinds of sculpting tools that I use to add a bark texture to the clay, and I'm doing this both on the outside and the inside of the tower. And this is what it looks like so far. I'm still going to sculpt some mushrooms out of clay, and then let me know your thoughts, but I was thinking of using this plastic grating for some windows between the trees. But do you think it would look better if I just leave it open like this? I'm not sure yet. And I'll still be adding in floors. But that's all for now. Like and follow for part 2. Welcome back to the Wizard Tower project. This is the Tavern Part 2. And today we're going to add quite a few pieces to the tavern, starting with the floors. I am using dollar store foam core as the base of the floors, and I glued popsicle sticks to the top of that. For the bottom floor kitchen, I decided to cut that in half, and for the top dining space, I've left as one piece. Now that piece was a little flimsy, it didn't have much to glue onto, so I added some reinforcements before moving on to the windows. For the tavern windows, I found some plastic grating at the dollar store, and then I based all of the pieces with black paint. I also dug some clear plastic out of my recycling bin, so once all of the plastic grating was based and dried, I glued them to this piece of plastic using, of course, Mod Podge. I glued the same size piece to the other side of the plastic, and once that all dried, I cut it out. Now for the windowsill, I am roughly measuring out, cutting and sanding pieces of craft sticks. I'm not going for perfectionism here because this is going to be a well-loved forest tavern. And I used wood glue to assemble all of these pieces together. I did base one of the windows in black, and then I decided to just not care about that for now. It's all gonna get painted later. So before I could build more tree branches, I wanted to glue the windows into where I had wanted them before I started on that process. So the hot glue was just a temporary hold. And again, for the trees and tree branches, I've used aluminum foil for placement. And then I'm going to sculpt over top of that with terracotta clay. The goal with this was to cover up more of the gaps that I had left and to seal in the windows. I did leave a few holes here or there to make it look more natural. And while I was still working with the clay, I added a few mushrooms. And that is where we leave the tower for today. I've got to let this dry, and then I'll get started on paint. Like and follow for part 3. Welcome back to the Wizard Tower project. This is the Tavern Part 3. And today we are going to paint what we have built so far. Starting with the inside floors, we have a base of burnt umber, followed by a dry brush of raw sienna. This is a really beautiful golden brown color. And following that, I did a dry brush of an off-white, followed by a wash of a very dark brown. After that has dried, this is how the floors turned out. Next, we move on to our tree walls, and I based everything in a dark gray, followed by a wash of a dark purple. Now, as you'll see coming up, I do lots of layers of a kind of gray purple, lots and lots of highlighting, and I'm doing the same on both sides of the tavern, inside and out. And once I got to this point, I decided to add another wash of purple. Taking a break from painting all this wood, I decided to paint the windowsills with raw sienna. This kind of golden brown looks really nice with the purple. And back to more highlighting. And this is what it looked like after I was done. And it was looking a little bare, so before we end this today, I am adding some flocking. This is just different kinds of moss that I found at Michael's and the dollar store, gluing it into some of these gaps that I created between the trees. And that's all for now. It is starting to look super magical, but I still need to create some more mushrooms for the outside, as well as a kitchen and a dining space. Lots left to do. Like and follow, and I'll see you all in part 4.
It's astounding. Time is fleeting. Madness takes its toll. But listen closely.
Not for very much longer.
I've got to keep control.
I remember doing the time warp, drinking those moments when the blackness would hit me and the void would be calling. Let's do the time warp again. Let's do the time warp again.
It's just a jump to the left.
And then a step to the right.
Welcome back to the Wizard Tower project. This is the final reveal of the Tavern Tower. And for the outside, we went for a faewild theme where a tavern has been built amongst the trees. Now let's take a closer look. I built a bunch of log tables and log stools and a whole bunch of mini food. And let's take a closer look at the table here in the back. It's actually a tea light. So the candle in the middle of the table lights up. Heading down to the kitchen, we have our food prep station. And in the kitchen, we have our chef with crates of food, sack of potatoes. He's cooking something on the stove. And just so you know, I made all these minis myself. So let's take a closer look. That's a crate of tomatoes and a crate of onions, mushrooms, carrots, and here is that sack of potatoes. And let's take a closer look at this food board with chicken and bread. And of course, for Cakegate 2023, I had to add a funfetti cake and a mini apple pie. And y'all should recognize this little sandwich. It's a mini Earl from Roll for Sandwich. That was one of the best things I've ever made, and I had to make a mini version of him. He has cheese, tomatoes, banana, lettuce, a fish, bologna, ketchup, and mayo on him. And of course, the little olive eyes. Now let's see how the tavern would work for a playable space. I've added in some more miniatures. You could probably fit 5 or 6 in this space without the stools. It's my little mini-me. She's ready to cut the cake. Back to the food prep area, we've got someone passed out, and one last look at the kitchen. Now, if you haven't voted on our very last tower theme, go now to my link tree, and we will reveal the winning theme soon.